Yep, there
Okay.
you go. My sister just joined too, so hopefully, as the presentation or the content is shared, more and more people will trickling in. So yeah, it's always open for anybody to join. Go
Oh,
ahead,
Mm.
Pak Rio. This
Okay.
is this is yours.
Ooh. Yeah. Okay. So I just made this 30 minutes ago when I remembered I was doing this.
no.
Wow, in 30 minutes you pulled this off?
Yeah. Well, I
That is
Googled video
amazing.
game PowerPoint template and it came up with Canva. So this was all already here. I just replaced the words.
Man,
But
this looks good. This
it
looks
looks
great.
great. Yeah. Yeah, very professional. I was underestimating the power of Canva.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so video game industry, brief overview. We'll see how brief it ends up. I don't know. Depends on how many questions people have.
Hey, do you want us to continue following the presentation and ask the question along the way, or we have to save it at the end?
Whenever, anytime you have
Okay.
questions, yeah. So this is a rough agenda of four things because the page already had four categories on it. So, uh,
That's cool.
so kind of like the foundation of the game industry, then what all the different departments do, all the stuff that's involved in completing a game, and then what's important in making good games. Um, okay, so this is the foundation page. Um, these were already here on the left side, so feel free to ignore
Oh,
those. Okay, um, so how games are made? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of people involved in these really big companies. Um, And one of the key parts to making a game is a game engine. There are some publicly available ones which are sort of free, like Unreal and Unity. But if you make over a certain amount of money from making games in them, then you have to pay a percentage to those engines. So um, they make a lot of money, but it's nice that anyone can make games that they want, but it's not as easy as it seems. So an engine provides a lot of kind of the framework for you. So you can it kind of does a lot of the stuff every game needs without having to do it from scratch, without having to reinvent the wheel. It's like things like rendering things to the screen, physics stuff and moving characters around. It has like the basics of that setup. So it's kind of like a good way to jumpstart it. Um, some AAA studios for making AAA games will use these actually, usually Unreal. Most AAA games are written in C++. So if you want to work on AAA games, you almost, as an engineer, you almost always need to learn C++, which isn't taught in a lot of schools actually. Most colleges only teach C sharp, so it's hard for the game industry to hire people actually. So if you happen to have C++ courses in university, then that's a great start because that's rare for studios looking to hire people. So they really like
you
that.
mentioned about AAA games. What does that mean?
Oh yeah. So AAA
GTA.
games
Okay.
basically
GTA
just
5.
means the biggest games, like first party games from so the three main game companies for the consoles, of course, are Nintendo, with the Switch, Microsoft with the Xbox, and Sony with the PlayStation. So any games that they're directly making are called first party games, and then games made by other companies are third party games. Um, so basically, most first party games, so from the three big companies, are going to be AAA games. They're just bigger, they have long stories, really good graphics, just all that stuff. So the the other type of game is usually just called an indie game. It's a pretty large category of any games that aren't those games. Um, and those are usually well, often they're made in C# actually instead of C++, because the premise behind that is C# is slower in general. So if you're trying to make a AAA game with all this crazy stuff going on, it's too slow. You can't do it. You can do it, but it takes a lot more work because you have to write code in a way that's more efficient. So you have to think about how you're writing the code a lot more. So there's some indie games in C++, but a lot of them are in C#. And Unity is the game engine for making games in C#, and Unreal is the game engine for making games in C++. So for AAA games, they'll use one of these two. They'll use Unreal sometimes, but a lot of studios just have their own engine where they made it themselves from scratch, which takes a long time. But usually, these companies have a long history and they built it up over years and years. So, yeah. So that's some basics about the industry. Any questions on that, I guess?
So the other one, I'm familiar with C++. The other one, C#, is that a programming language as well?
Yeah, that's actually the most taught one in university. They usually just teach C#. So for games that need to run really fast, to do all these things, C++ is the go-to language, but C# is what's taught in university because
Easy.
yes, one, it's easier. Allegedly. I don't exactly agree with that, but I think C++ is easier in the long run, but C# is easier short term to learn and start. But it
Well,
gets way more complicated, I think.
for like making graphical user interface, I prefer C
Oh
sharp.
yeah. Yeah, it has a library that, yeah. So C#, so actually game studios, even the AAA game studios, they use C# for all the tools. And that's why, because they have easy UI libraries available. So you can just make stuff that, with Windows that show information and stuff really easily. So all the tools are done in C# for that reason. Yeah, definitely easier for that kind of thing. But yeah,
for performance C++.
yeah. And so, but the other reason is just because C# is what's used for most applications on the computer. And that's most of the tech industry is going to be applications. And actually, that's where the money is. You make a lot more money making applications and websites and, enterprise software for companies. They pay a lot more if you work on those things. The games industry actually pays the lowest of anything in the tech industry. So if you go to college and get an engineering degree, yeah, going into the games industry is going to be making the least amount of money usually. So you kind of have to be passionate about wanting to make games to do it. And the studios know this, like they know, they kind of rely on you being passionate, and they can get away with not paying you so much because they're like, well, you get to work on games. That's an honor. Like you're lucky you get to do this. So
I see.
so that's kind
So
of unfortunate, but
that's very interesting to learn, especially for our younger kids here or the youth
yeah.
here who are looking for career or college degree or focus in their major. I wanted to know when uh, I'm glad that there are a few other software or electrical engineers in here. When you guys were looking for a job, did you not apply to any of the gaming companies, or did you also apply to gaming just because you have the passion in the gaming?
Are you asking me?
Well, anybody in the software or electrical engineer.
I only applied to games.
Oh,
Can
okay,
you
so that's
repeat the
good. It means
question,
that
Mas
that's your
Chandra?
passion.
What was the
Yeah.
question?
Can
The
you
question
repeat the
is,
question?
when you were looking for a job, I know that gaming is one of the industry that you can go to. Did you purposely avoid the gaming industry because of the pay, or it's not your interest at all. Like Rio seems like he has the passion, he had the passion, so he decided to jump into the industry. But how about for the rest of the crew here?
Well, I did have some interest on getting to game industry when I was in college back in Indonesia. And then I have like couple friends that were actively pursuing that route, but they are very good in maths. And then I found that like
Oh,
other than passion, your math skills needs to be extraordinary. I mean, especially if you want to deal with graphics. So it's like, okay, these guys are like Superman. So like when I try to pursue that path, it's like, okay, probably I don't have that skill. So I just try to go another route that is probably more general rather than specific to maths. So
got it. Yeah.
but I did have like gaming is probably like one of my motivation going towards like computer background, just because I want to know how to make these games.
Yeah.
And gaming is not just about graphics, right? So Rio probably mentioned about physics. So it's mainly about like what we learn about science in at school, and how do you actually apply it, like in
Mhm.
form of computer simulations. That's my main attraction on games, and how you learn about it. And then
Okay.
eventually you can actually use that skills to not to make actual games, but other kind of uh, product like simulation. So it's like very close uh, relationship between games and science products, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing the insights. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's games are generally, like Lazar mentioned, difficult to make. Um, and yeah, you need math skills for a lot of it. Um, you don't necessarily need to be a math genius, but you need to know basic geometry and algebra concepts to a certain amount. So it's interesting, actually. The game interviews to get a game job, they are generally in a limited set of questions they ask. They basically want to know if you can do a few certain things, and you can actually study just those. So you don't actually need to know a whole lot of math, because all these companies just kind of ask the same questions in the same area, the same set of things. So as long as you prepare for those, which if you're good, you can do any math, you can probably figure it out eventually. Um, then you can pass the interview. That doesn't mean you know how to make a game, but they don't seem to care much about that as long as you can pass their questions. And a lot of them are like trivia questions even. It's like as long as you prepare those specific questions, they don't care if you can make a game or not, they'll hire you. So even though usually what you're doing on the job has nothing to do with any of those questions. So your day-to-day job, yeah, very little connection. You're not I'm not I don't do math that often, especially even. I have to do some math, very minimal, maybe once every month or something, one day a month. So and even then there's a lot of people to ask for help if I don't know something. So um yeah. Anyway. Um yeah, so the I guess I'll just continue here. So there's a lot of different types of games. So companies will usually with each game try to market to a different group of people. Um, there's two main groups of people that generally you decide between before narrowing it down further, but usually it's like you're making a game for gamers or you're making a game for casual players. Um, so games for gamers tend to be harder. They have more going into the gameplay mechanics, which are like platforming, like doing difficult jumps, difficult combat sequences and things like that. Whereas casual games tend to focus more on cutscenes. So you're kind of watching a movie in ways, letting you experiment with a lot of different things, like a sandbox kind of thing. Like Minecraft is the biggest example of that. So yeah, those are the two basic categories. And of course, a lot of games try and get people from both groups. So it varies. So okay, well, does anyone have questions on any of those things?
Yeah, so I have questions. So just quick one. So like you mentioned about some role probably doesn't require like a very complicated math skills.
Mhm.
So are you gonna talk about like different
Yeah,
roles in developing
yeah,
games?
I think that's the next page.
Okay.
So
Thank
yeah, there's a
you.
lot of different roles. So actually, another way to get into the games industry instead of majoring in computer science, if you're trying to get in as an engineer, you can actually major in physics, and that's very math intensive, obviously, if you're going to be a physics programmer. But having a physics major is very attractive to game companies because they usually have a lack of people who are really good at physics because they're mostly computer science majors. So if they see, oh, you have a physics major, um, they're really attracted to like, oh, this guy can do all the physics in our game because it's modeled after reality. It's real physics usually with, they make some tweaks to reality, but you need to understand physics. But if you want to get in that way, you're going to end up doing physics work at least at the start, unless you transition to something else. So you have to really like doing math and doing physics to get in that way. Yeah, so actually, you don't need to go to college at all if you want to get into the game industry. Many AAA companies will hire you if you just pass the interview and you know how to program in C++. That's for AAA companies, of course. You can also work at an indie company, in which case you want to know C# and know how to work with Unity really well. So having a degree helps because it means a lot. I mean, getting hired is all about perception. You have to make yourself look good. And if they see, oh, there's a degree, he knows what he's talking about, they don't need to be extra vigilant to make sure you know your stuff. Like if they're hiring someone who doesn't have a degree, they're usually more careful to make sure that it's probably harder to pass the interview, but it's definitely possible. Yeah, companies hire people who know how to program all the time that don't have a degree. So you can actually spend the time and money you would spend in college, like just taking time on your own to learn how to make games. You can learn a lot more, a lot faster than going to college. But it's not about learning. It's about the perception, and it's about getting the job. So yeah, the degree helps with that. So I majored in computer science, but the games industry is still, it's actually very hard to get into. Um, It's just there's not that many spots. The industry is very kind of fragile, where a lot of companies are shutting down or being bought out and then shut down, and people are losing their jobs a lot. It's like on LinkedIn every week, there's like a new company shutting down, and like 100 people are out of a job. So it's a pretty crazy industry in general. But yeah, when I finished college, I had to apply to 35 different game companies from all over the country before I got accepted to one. Um, and it was a terrible job at a company called Blind Squirrel Games in California, near where I went to college. And it was for a junior position. So that was a work for hire company. So that's usually an easier one to get into to kind of get your foot in the door, because they take contracts from bigger companies and make games for them, which is usually just porting a game, which is like it's released on Xbox and they want it on PC. So you're just taking a game that already exists and making it work on another platform. Um, so yeah. yeah, I was lucky to get accepted, even though, it wasn't a great company. And once you get in somewhere, then you start getting credits that you can put on your resume that you worked on this game, this game, this game. And most companies actually require you work on a game for a year at least or 2 years before they'll even considering hiring you, even at like a low level. So it's all about getting your foot in the door and then getting those credits, getting that experience so you can move elsewhere. Like most industries in America, as far as I know, the best way to advance is you have to keep switching jobs. If you just stay at one company, it's rare to get promoted, even if you're doing a really good job. So, um, yeah, the usual way to advance is to start at one company and then switch as you just go up one position each time if you're trying to get a higher position. So that's how you make more money too. But okay, yeah. Um, yeah. Any questions on that?
I guess the interview, when you perform the interview with some of these gaming companies, did you have to conduct the tasks, not only um, perform the conversation, but also work on the tasks in math or in coding or
Yeah. So there's actually very little conversation in most game interviews.
oh,
Which
okay.
is not good. They should have conversation. That should be an important part. But um, yeah, usually there's a test that you take before anyone even talks to you at all. Um, you might have an HR call first. Sometimes the HR call comes after, but that's the usual format is you have a test. For example, for my first job, the test was you have 12 hours to make checkers. I think it was. Yeah. Um, and it has to have an AI that you can play against. So that's pretty hard to do for someone just out of college who's never made a game before. Um, but what I did was I started making the game while I was in college, so I kind of knew, a lot of things I didn't learn in college because you don't really learn how to make a game in college, even if it's like a game programming major. Um, just actually doing it yourself is kind of how you learn. And I started making it in high school even, so I had some experience. So yeah, so I was able to pass that test. Barely. My AI was like, it just randomly chose a move, but that was good enough to impress them because they know there's not a whole lot of time. So once you do the test, and it varies. Sometimes the test is making something like that, like making a game like the short game like that. Sometimes it's just a bunch of questions, which are, the trivia questions I talk about, or they want to make sure how do you make this code more performant, which is something you might actually have learned in college and university. So, um, anyway, if you pass that test, then well, first of all, it's a lot of his trial and error. You're not going to pass your first interview because you don't know what any of the questions are, unless you know someone who knows what the questions are and got them from them. Because yeah, game companies all over the country, they mostly use the same type of question. Um, so yeah, it kind of blindsides you if you don't know in advance. There's just questions you have no idea how to answer. And then the thing about these questions, you can look up how to do them usually in like 5 minutes. Some of the math ones you might take you like 30 minutes or an hour to learn, but a lot of them are things you can just learn in 15 minutes just by Googling it. So it's not really a good way to judge a candidate, but that's just the standard. It's just people like doing the standard. It's what happened to them when they were interviewed, so they're familiar with it. So that's what they do when they interview other people. It's just how it is. Um, so if you pass the test, um, then yeah, you have an HR call, which is just usually a quick like 15-minute talk with the head of HR. And the point of that interview is usually they're just trying to um, check if you're real, if you actually know what you're doing. There's it's kind of like a safety check to make sure you're not wasting people's time. and they'll ask like, oh, why do you want to work here? Tell me a little bit about yourself is something they always ask. So you need something prepared. So you're not like stuttering and unsure how to answer, because then they'll think you're not professional or whatever. So that usually is an easy interview to pass. I don't think I ever failed one of those interviews. Because yeah, the head of HR doesn't really know anything about your job or making a game usually. So they're just like kind of talking to you. So that's where most of the talking is in the interview process. And then, so you pass that, you pass the test, then they'll have you do on either Zoom or in person uh test. Well, I only know how engineering applications work, right? So engineering interviews work. There's a lot of different departments. So but for engineering, this is how it works. And then, so you do your Zoom or in-person test. It's called a whiteboard test usually. Sometimes it's on paper, but usually it's on a whiteboard. And they'll just ask you questions about how to program certain things or solve certain things. And it's usually pretty rapid fire, like not much conversation. It's just like two programmers will ask you 5 questions, then another two programmers will come in and ask you 5 questions, then another two. They like to mix it up so everyone on the team gets to interview you, so they all have a say in whether you should be hired. And you can get unlucky, and sometimes it's just some random thing you wouldn't have thought to know in advance, and you get it wrong, and then they think you don't know what you're doing. Um, Other times, like in some interviews, I knew the right answer, but the person asking the question didn't, and he thought it was a different answer, and he argued with me about it, and then he was like the lead, so he didn't give me an offer because he was embarrassed, I guess. So that can happen too. Um, but yeah, they're usually pretty hard. Um, just because you have no idea what the question is going to be in advance. And usually they require kind of specific knowledge or like there's a trick to it that you just have to know or look up, and you just don't know what question is coming. So every interview is different and they'll have different questions for that. So, but yeah, they do tend to fall in the same category of questions. So, um, yeah, you can prepare that way. But so yeah, that's how it works usually. And then sometimes they'll have you do another technical interview after that, which is harder with different people. And then sometimes they'll have you talk to like the director or the team, your team lead or a producer or something just to see if they like you. But that's how it goes. Yeah, and you can apply anywhere in the country. They don't usually care. They'll fly you out to do an interview, AAA companies anyway, or they'll just do it on Zoom, and they usually pay for you to move there actually if you get the job. So it's pretty open. If you don't like have a house, you can pretty much apply anywhere. So, and you have to because it's so hard to get a game job because they're so limited. That you just have to apply a lot. So yeah, that's why it took me 35 attempts. And unfortunately, because you have to do this test and in advance before you even talk to them, and it's time consuming, it's a lot of work. You can't just like apply. It's like, okay, now make checkers in 24 hours, now make chess in 24 hours, now make a card game in 24 hours. And you have to spend a lot of time doing these. So but yeah, if you want to do it, you have to apply to it. You can just apply for one and hope you'll get it. That's very unlikely. It's like if you know you want to do a game job, you just have to apply for a lot of game jobs and just keep trying. If you keep trying, you most likely bound to get it eventually if you learn from your mistakes and prepare properly. So okay. Any more questions on that? Okay, so these are some of the different departments, the ones I remembered anyway. I think I have the most important ones. Um, There's a lot. So, for engineering, there's uh, gameplay is that's what I do. I'm a gameplay engineer. Um, so yeah, so engineering is usually gameplay, user interface, engine, and graphics are the 4 main areas. Um, and yeah, so they all the interviews for them are pretty much very similar, especially at a junior level or a lower level. So you mostly have to prepare for the same set of interview questions, whichever one of those four you want to go into. But yeah, so gameplay is what I do, and that's focused on the core of the game. In my opinion, it's like player movement, all the enemies, how they move, how they fight, all your abilities, just making the actual things the player does in the game work. And that's generally like it's one of the easier things to do as well. And I think it's the most fun because I'm like, if you're interested in games, obviously you want to work on making all the stuff you actually do in the game work. So that's what I've always wanted to do since I was a kid, was to work on gameplay. User interface is generally considered the easiest. It can be complicated, but it's actually kind of weird that it's considered easy because it's like hard to do right, but no one really likes working on user interface, I would say. It's the least popular one. So they kind of put people who have less experience in there, even just to start, just because it's something they can sort of do properly, especially with the right guidance. So user interface is like the menus, um, the elements you see on the screen that aren't part of the game, but are like in the foreground, like the health bar, the map, radar, that kind of stuff. So that's what user interface works on. I actually started in my first job, I was on the user interface team. So we were working on an MMO, changing it from a PC game to a console game. So we had just hundreds of panels that we had to make it so you could navigate them with the controller. So that was basically what we did for a year straight, was making it so you could navigate on panels with the controller. And there's just so many panels. So
which departments plan the cheat code?
um, none of them usually. There's not, most games don't have cheat codes these days anymore. The hackers figure it out themselves. So, but it would be gameplay if there were to be cheat codes in the game. That would be gameplay. Okay, so any questions on gameplay or user interface?
So who decides what to show in the screen for user interface? Like if you have menus and then who decides the transition from one menu to another and what to show?
So it's a mixture where usually it will be the person in charge of user interface. So each department has a lead usually, or a department head, and they kind of have a lot of say. So it's usually them and maybe the person who's working on it, they can contribute opinions, but they can't like declare this is going to happen. They have to follow orders. So they can say like, oh, I think it should be this, but at the end of the day, their department head or lead, whoever is in charge of their team, may not necessarily be the department head. Like if it's a big department, you might have several leaders of different units in the department. But yeah, usually the manager, person in a more manager role, is going to decide that kind of stuff. But they also have to follow the direction from the director. Usually there's a few different directors. It depends on the game. Every studio is different, but usually you have like an overall director for the game, like a game director. Then you'll have an art director as well. Usually there's a design director. So for like transitions and screens and menus and stuff, usually the design director doesn't care about that stuff. Sometimes they will. But yeah, usually it's going to be the UI lead and the art director who have the most say on that, because the art director is going to care about how the game looks and that sort of thing. So, okay. So engine is probably the biggest area of engineering for a game. So engine programmers do a lot of things. They usually have a few guys who handle the physics, a few people who handle the animations, a few people who handle the effects. And that's like writing the code to support those things so that they all work in the game properly. So yeah, it's a big department. So usually most of your programmers are going to be in the engine department. So I worked on the engine team after I was on the user interface team just because that was what was available. And then because of that, at my first job, Blind Squirrel Games, since I was working on the engine team, then they eventually laid me off because they laid off half the department. Because they had a contract to work on the Halo for PC, and it got canceled, so they just fired everyone because they couldn't afford to pay them. So then I got a job at Rockstar on the engine team, and I didn't really like engine work because it's more of the back end stuff. It's like you're supporting the other systems. Whereas with gameplay, it's like you write code and then you see it happen on the screen, like the player doing stuff. But with the engine team, it's like you're just writing stuff that other departments are going to use. So it's not directly, you're not directly seeing changes in the game because of your work. But I mean, in a way you do once the other departments start making use of your systems, and then you know that that's possible because of what you did. So some people like that a lot. Engine work's usually a lot harder as well. So you need to be a better engineer. Usually you need to know more about engineering, how to code in C++ and in general. So the engine team is also generally responsible for any problems, like the game is crashing, you know, there's a lot of different reasons the game could be crashing, but usually it goes to the engine team just to figure out why is this happening, because they're like the smartest usually. So it's like they have the most experience and it's their job. So yeah, so they're generally the first line of like what is happening here. And sometimes they'll send it to another department and say like, hey, this is your fault, you need to fix this or you need to change this. But yeah, it's really hard work to fix a lot of the crashes. They handle like multi-threading stuff, which is complicated, but it's like different threads of your processor doing things at the same time, and they need to synchronize that work, and it's very technical. So yeah, it's very complicated, and yeah, the engine department does all that stuff. So if you're doing like physics on the engine department, obviously you need to know a lot of math. But if you're handling like memory management or just fixing crashes, usually math isn't involved that much. So even within the engine, it depends whether you need math or not. So and then gameplay needs to use math, but it's usually pretty simple. It's usually pretty simple math. Like you only need to know a few things, and anything complicated, sometimes the engine department already provided something for you to use. Like usually the game engine or the engine team will have prepared like things for working with vectors or working with doing dot products and cross products and all that stuff. It's all like there included already in the game code. So you can just use it. You don't have to know how it works necessarily. So yeah, so then graphics is pretty closely related to engine. But usually there's only a few graphics programmers, so they're not a huge team. And they handle interfacing with the graphics drivers, and that's the area I know least about is graphics. So yeah, I'm not very good at graphics. That is very math heavy from what I know. So yeah, that's something I need to learn more about because it's like my weakest area for sure. And a lot of times though, graphics programmers, sometimes they're not very technical as much as the engine team. So a lot of what ends up happening a lot of the time is the engine team actually has to help the graphics programmers with graphics crashes and stuff because they just know how to figure it out better. Sometimes, obviously it depends, but so those are all the main engineering departments. The other big departments are design, art, and production. So design is actually not what most people expect. And actually, it's the hardest job to get is the design job. So you don't need to know math. Well, it helps actually on design even, but most people think you don't need to know math. So people think that's like, oh, I want to decide how the game gets made. And they think like, oh, if I'm a designer, that's what they do. They design the game. So there's a lot of demand for that job because people think it's easy and it's still involved in games and they think it gives them control over making the game. So that's actually a pretty strong misconception, at least in modern times. The design department, aside from like the design director level at the top, almost everyone, like 95% of the design department doesn't actually do any design, doesn't make any design decisions. And it's actually getting more and more rare for them to even have too much of an input into how something should be designed. But usually how the industry has kind of changed is designers are kind of like programmer junior, basically. A lot of companies like Rockstar have them just writing code full time. But they work in an easier language. So like it's usually called a scripting language. So it's usually really simple. But it's very technical. It's like you're writing code. So at Rockstar, actually, all the designers write C# code full time. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, they're basically just working, and then all the decisions are made from the top. And that's just a way, I guess, companies are trying to save money, right? It's like they get engineering work without having to pay engineers. But there's problems with it because they don't have technical backgrounds, but they're doing technical work. So it can cause a lot of problems. But yeah, some people like it a lot because it's not as intensive as engineering necessarily, and you can like prototype ideas, and like you don't get to decide which ideas to go with, but you can pitch a lot of ideas sometimes. It depends on the studio, of course, but so yeah, that's mostly what design does. They'll use like visual scripting languages a lot too, where they're not writing code, but it's basically code. It's just you're wiring things together visually instead of like typing it out. But that can be a bad thing as well because a lot of games, they get so complicated and are doing so many elaborate, complicated things in this visual scripting language, and it's just harder to work with. It's harder to figure out what's going on, and sometimes you have literally thousands of different little squares, nodes that you're wiring different things together, and it's like even more complicated than the code in a lot of cases. So, you gotta find a good balance between what to put in code and what to put in the visual language, and they interface together in different ways. So, yeah, so designers generally are pretty close to gameplay. Usually they work really close with a gameplay programmer, and they're both like designers are doing the scripting end and coders are doing the C++ end. And sometimes it's really arbitrary what functionality is implemented in one versus the other. And it can vary a lot, but it's usually just kind of random even sometimes. So they're both kind of doing the same work though. But yeah, so designers are making things work in the game, same as the gameplay team. They're making the bosses move, they're making the enemies move. Yeah, they're handling all the puzzles that you do in the game and that sort of thing. Any questions? Because I've been talking a lot.
Is the QA try to hack your games?
Yes, people try to hack. And it's the engine team's responsibility to fix that because, again, they fix all the problems. So, yeah. Sometimes you'll actually have, at Rockstar, they had a team of like 4 people dedicated to fighting hacks full time. That's all they did. So, They weren't very good at it, but though, because there's a lot of hacks in GTA. But yeah,
So which one of these department that is responsible to make the game fun to play?
that's the design department. The line can be blurred sometimes, but so I say the design department, but again, it's like the head designer who's making all the decisions. So usually it's like one guy. Um, so it comes down to like the design director, the game director who has like total control. Like a game director is more like a producer in a movie where it's like they don't always get involved in every little detail of making it, like the a movie director does, but they have the final say because the producer is giving the money. So it's kind of like similar to that, where a game director, they're not giving money, but it's like they have the final say. Um, so they can overrule any of the other department heads on anything if they want. So it's usually like mostly responsible for making the game fun is going to be the design director and the game director. And then of course everyone helps. Like it takes everyone's work to bring it together, and people are constantly giving ideas and opinions, and it depends on like what the design director or the game director takes and what they decide to go with. Um, and gameplay engineers as well can have a lot of say because they're actually implementing the stuff, so they can implement it certain ways and then kind of say this is how it should be or what do you guys think and get sign off and that kind of thing. So um, yeah, so at the low level, designers and gameplay engineers who are actually working on all the stuff you do can contribute in a lot of little ways constantly. And then the game director and the design director get the decision-making power to like try and make sure it's fun overall from all, and they can overrule any of these decisions as they want. So yeah. Um,
And then like all these departments like probably has like dependency between one and another, right? So but then
yeah.
in terms of the development timeline, like
Hmm.
does
Yeah.
anybody like start first?
Yes. Usually gameplay starts. Oh, well, so it depends. Like, if you don't have an engine yet and you're not using a public one like Unreal, then you need an engine to do anything. So, if you're like a new studio and you want to use a custom engine, which is probably not a good idea because you don't have any money yet and you don't have time to waste making an engine, you'd have to wait till the engine's done, or at least, coming along pretty well. Unless, again, yeah, but if you're using Unreal, you already have an engine, so you don't have to worry about that. Or if you're at a studio that's been around for a long time, they already have their engine. So when the project starts, you already have that. So after that, gameplay you can start right away usually. And yeah, they usually work without the graphics. Like they'll use like placeholders, which like just squares often. Like the first boss in the game is just like two squares sometimes, all the time for a long time until the art comes in. But the gameplay start right away, kind of prototyping, trying to find out what's fun to help design, make decisions, um, and just get the game going. Like you can start moving and jumping in because that's like the core of the game. You need that going. Um, a lot of times art can't start right away because you don't know what there is to make art for yet. It depends on the project. Some projects it's like, oh, I'm making this type of game, so it's already a known, and that happens a lot in the industry, like copying PUBG or copying League of Legends. There's like hundreds of games of those types, so it's like you kind of already have a target, so you kind of know, oh, I can start making the art for these characters, and maybe that's why a lot of AAA companies tend to copy games like that, so they just have more of a known target, so they can be more efficient and get work done faster. Um, but yeah, if there's no design yet, you don't know what the boss is supposed to be or anything, you can't make art for it yet. So art is starting later usually. Um, so that's part of why the industry is so crazy too, I think, because sometimes you have to hire people full time, but they don't have work to do for long periods of time. Um, but some studios try and offset this, like they'll have artists working on the art for one game while the engineers are starting up the next game. And then as soon as they get that going along further, then the artists switch over. So they're like working constantly, but switching between different projects that are on different schedules. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Do the game design change based on beta tester input?
Yeah, the game design actually changes constantly. So the first beta testers are actually the studio staff itself. Like anyone in the studio is a lot in large part the designers and the gameplay team, engineering team, just because they're doing the stuff, so they have a lot of ideas and they see what's going on. But they're constantly playing the game, testing things, putting in things. So it's like design is changing constantly because people are constantly giving ideas and decisions are constantly being made. And even up until the end of a project, usually designs are changing pretty significantly to try and make the game fun and get things in a good place.
Thank you.
But it depends on the studio after that, but some studios will actually bring in like family members from the employees to test. Others will like get focus groups. But some studios don't do really any of that. So it varies widely. It depends on the studio. And some games, a lot of games will do like they'll release in early access on Steam. So it's like the game's still being made and they're getting feedback constantly from a bunch of people, a bunch of players before it's actually considered done. But you can only do that once you have something playable first to start from. So yeah, and there's different blockers throughout the whole process. Like sometimes like gameplay has to do like or even engine team have to do like more passes of code after the art is in because you don't know exactly how it's going to look. So art can be really complicated. So it comes with collision generally, which controls the game logic because it's like that's the stuff you touch that stops you, like walls, or when a enemy attacks you, the collision touches you, and that's when you get hurt. So until that stuff is often like arted, you don't even know exactly how the gameplay is going to work. So you have to wait for that, and then you have to like do another pass where like, okay, now this is how it's actually going to happen. Now I need to adjust these things to make it work properly. Yeah. So, and then art is often blocked because they're like, oh, I finished this, but I can't see it in game yet because there's nothing to put it on yet because we haven't done the engineering work to make that thing show up in the game. So, they can be blocked by that too. So it's a lot of constant teams being blocked by different things. It's kind of a labyrinth. And that's where the production department comes in. So the production department, their job is basically to keep people moving forward and unblock people. So they're kind of like, it's kind of like secretaries. So very different from a movie producer who's like the person in charge. Production is more like assistants, like helpers in the game industry. So they're taking notes from all the meetings, they're putting in the tasks, they're making the chains of, oh, this is blocked by this task blocked by this, and then kind of talking to all the teams to get priorities changed and get people working on certain tasks just to get everyone moving forward and try and keep it efficient and get the game done. So yeah, that's what the production team does. Networking is a big part, but only if your game has networking. So it's kind of optional, but it depends. If it's a networking game, then you need a whole team of networking engineers, like 5 at least usually. And networking is really complicated, almost as complicated as multi-threading that the engine team handles. Just because you have different computers sending messages and you have to process them in the right order, and it can be really complicated. So yeah, and networking has to work really close with gameplay too, because you're networking the gameplay mechanics. So it's like if a player moves, well, the other players need to see that. So it's tied closely together. Then there's writing. Someone needs to write like all the dialogue from the characters. Usually writers are contractors. They'll just hire a few and have them do it all and then give them like some high level guidance and then kind of sign off on it. And then, you know, their contract ends because they do it all in a short time. So they don't want to keep paying them a full salary for the whole time the game's being made. And then so art comes down to there's like character artists and who make all the creatures, all the bosses, all the player stuff. There's environment artists who make all the landscape, all the things in the background, all the gimmicks is what we call them, which is just like usually like a windmill or something that you do a puzzle on, just like all the mechanics in the game all this like objects in the game. And then you have the visual effects artists who are just making it's very similar to visual effects in movies. In fact, game studios will often hire movie visual effects artists to do their visual effects. Because it's basically the same job. You're making the effects, you're making the art for showing explosions and all kinds of stuff. And games actually kind of generally look pretty bad without any visual effects. It adds a lot. So visual effects artists are usually full-time the whole project. And they're one of the most overloaded teams generally because they're just in a AAA game, there's so many effects. Every single room of the game has different things going on that need to show different effects. Like all the attacks need effects, all the enemies need effects when they move, when they do attacks and things like that. And then you have animators as well who are making, all the characters move in certain ways. That's usually a large team too. So yeah, it takes a lot of people to make a game. And then quality assurance is a big department where they just play the game nonstop generally and look for problems. So these games are so big that the engineers can't find all the problems themselves, even though they're the ones making it. Like say they make an attack, well, they don't know what that attack's going to do in every single room on every single enemy and every single gimmick. So you need a whole team of QA people, usually pretty huge team, like at least 10 people, constantly playing the game and just finding problems and writing up bugs for the engineers to fix. And then marketing is really important. You can have like an amazing game and it won't matter if it's not marketed well, no one will buy it, no one will play it. So marketing is really important as well. Okay, that was a huge amount of information. Any more questions on that?
Which departments does the voiceover
Oh,
is
yeah,
done in?
so usually they'll hire actors. They hire voice actors and they're like contracts too, usually.
Oh,
They come in, they do all the voices in a couple months and then they leave.
okay.
And often you'll give them like way more lines than you actually need just because you don't know what you're going to use because the design is constantly changing. So it's like you're not sure if you're going to need them saying certain things or not. So it's usually just like way more lines than end up in the game, but you just have them record them all. And usually those people doing the voices will also do mocap, motion capture. So a lot of AAA games use motion capture where they're just like acting out all the scenes, all the cutscenes, all the movements that they do in the cutscenes. And yeah, it makes it look more realistic is the idea. But it's a lot of money and effort and time to put it in the game. Like it takes a lot of the engine team, of course, handles that, getting that working in the game. And yeah, it can add a lot to make it more realistic, but it's a big investment. Yeah, usually the voice actors will also act for do the motion for their characters in the cutscenes and stuff. Yeah, they just wear a big suit and do the movements and it captures every part of their body moving. So yeah.
Do the engine team purchase like third-party module? Like if they have, better physics or better visual effects, instead of
Sometimes,
making, yeah.
yeah, sometimes they will. But game companies are usually pretty strict about they want to be able to fully control it. So even if they do that, they'll often modify it. Like they'll want access to the source code and they'll be changing it constantly.
Okay.
Yeah, because every game is very specific in what they want to do, so they need a lot of control to be able to do all that stuff. So. And I forgot audio on here. There's usually there's a few engine programmer or one engine programmer at least who will handle audio, and then there's an audio department that makes all these sounds and puts them into the game. Similar to the visual effects team making all the effects that get put in the game. So yeah, so yeah, it's crazy that games get made with all these different departments having to do all these different things and connect them all together. That's why it takes, like, especially these days, it's like an average of 6 years to make a game or something. So
So when will we have GTA 6?
supposedly next year, but yeah, they said when I left that they they had just announced it for like 2025 when I left, and all the engine programmers were saying there's no way we're going to be doing 2025. No one asked me about it, is what everyone was saying. Like, there's no way we're doing that. And yeah, they didn't. They delayed it. So hopefully they're right this time and it will release. But
They are still milking the GTA 5, I guess.
yeah, part of the problem there is, like I mentioned, the production team is in charge of making sure the game gets done and moving things along. Um, so there actually aren't any engineering producers at Rockstar. They fired them all. So yeah, the engineers were upset that they kept being told what to do by the producers. So there was like a revolt, and they said, you gotta fire these producers or we're quitting, and they fired them all. So yeah, pretty crazy.
Piracy is it a big problem in games that people don't pay?
That people don't want.
Don't pay for the game? Like I heard there is like a
Oh,
way that you can,
it's very marginally affects the market. It's not a big impact. People in the game industry especially, they'll get very upset about it because they're like, oh, I worked hard for 6 years and someone just stole it without paying. But it's actually a very small percentage of the profit they're losing. The companies don't really care that much, but they like money, so they'll try and stop it and shut things down. But I mean, there's so many pirate sites, you can't really stop it, and there's just they try and put in security apps and stuff that stop people, but there's just a big there's just like a lot of hackers that just like full time just try and hack games and get past the security and stuff. So most games end up getting cracked pretty quickly. Sometimes it takes a year though, just because they put good security in, or no one's working on it for whatever reason, but none of the hackers are. But yeah, it doesn't lose too much money. In fact, you actually lose more money if you put in intense security because people get upset about it. Like,
De novo.
hmm.
That's like a security anti-crack.
Yeah. Well, people will get upset like, oh, you're togging the resources on my computer just because of this piracy thing you're trying to stop. How about spending that effort making a good game instead? And people get really upset about it. So
Yeah, I heard the de novo DRM thing.
mhm.
That
Yeah,
it's
people were
a
really
lot of
upset when they heard that one.
resources.
Yeah, the Riot one is the worst right now. Like you need to like it needs to be running as soon as your computer starts, even at like a very low level, and it's crazy. Like if you close it at any point, then you can't play any of the games unless you restart your computer. So they know nothing happened between when your computer started and when you started the game. So that one's pretty awful. But Riot's such a big company that because they make League of Legends, that people put up with it because they want to play their game so much. So mhm. Yeah. Okay. I
Anybody
don't know how
else?
much time we have. I mean, I can be done, but
That's kind of our weakness
yeah.
and deficiency. We doesn't seem to set an end time just
Yeah.
because I
We
would
need
like to allow
producers.
everybody to enjoy and have the discussion as long as they'd like to.
Yeah.
Still 2.5 hours before midnight, so I think that's good.
Well, I'm
If you
curious
keep
about
answering questions, I'll keep answering them.
I'm curious about uh, currently we have AI pretty much in every part of our
Mhm.
life. As
Yeah.
a game programmer like yourself, is there any concern or worry in the future where a lot of this machine that will replace the jobs of human being? Because technically, if they can write the codes,
Mhm.
we just need
Yeah.
to input the proper prompt or
Yeah.
in parameters in order to
Mhm.
run what they want to do. I just want to
Yeah.
see what's your take
Game,
on that?
yeah, game programmers are very much not worried about that. Like they think it's a joke even that people think the AI could do it. And
Play
the
some.
AI is impressive. Like it's crazy how much stuff they can do. But making a game is just so hard, especially with all these interacting systems. It's just like the AI is nowhere near the ability to do that yet. And a lot of that is comes down to games are so customized. Like every game is completely different, doing completely different things. Um, where the AI excels is doing things that have been done a lot before, the same things over and over. So AI is actually really good at making websites because the websites all kind of function very similarly compared to a game, which could be anything could be happening. Um, so yeah, so the people who get paid a lot making websites, they're the ones who need to worry because that makes a lot more money than game programmers too.
Yeah.
So that's part of it also, like game companies, they already don't pay a whole lot. So, you know, um, they they don't have a lot of motivation to replace the engineers, especially when it sounds like it's gonna be complicated. It's not gonna work well. Um, but we use some AI tools, some companies do anyway. And to help them, but it's like you need a person to like connect it all together. There's a lot of bugs in AI generated code, and with how many things are going on in a game, it would be a nightmare trying to a AAA game anyway, run a game based on AI code. It would take more work than it would to make it from scratch to try and fix all the problems. So yeah.
Or maybe a different question, which part of the element in game making that can be helped with AI?
Probably a lot of the math, a lot of some of the engine stuff, like the interface, like the graphics programmer stuff, interfacing with the graphics card, to some extent, because usually most games have a lot of custom stuff and they like do a lot of special things. So, you know, it still need a person, you still need a person there, but user interface is probably another one because navigating panels and stuff is usually mostly the same in most games. So they can take, I mean, the way AI works now is it takes information that already exists and it just takes a huge amount of it and it uses, you know, deep learning to figure out mysteriously how to get a good output, even though no one understands how uh, why, like how it's thinking, how it decides to make that. It's just crunching numbers. So um, just using a lot of data, and it kind of just gets lucky through trial and error, but like infinite trial and error processing power. So it's like eventually it's going to figure out the right steps to get a good result. But it needs the huge set of data of things that have done similar things. So since games are so unique, there isn't a huge amount of data on how to do each thing. In isolation, there's plenty of things within games that are done a lot. Um, and AI could be used to do those things like, oh, how do I tell if this enemy is in front of me or behind me? Um, how do I get the angle between two things? But those are all mostly things you can just Google anyway and just kind of copy paste code. So it's like the AI doesn't really help a huge amount there. But it can help a little if it's a little more tricky, but still something that's been done a lot. You know, you can generate that code and then just look at it and fix anything or you know, so it's a good tool to help an engineer, but yeah, it's not going to replace pretty much any of the departments.
How about the things like the assets, like the writings, the dialogues, the 3D models, visual effects?
Yeah.
Can they
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I was thinking more of engineering, but yeah, people are really focused on AI replacing engineers, but yeah, that's like the least thing they're likely to replace, at least in games. Um, but yeah, people are using AI to do, especially 2D games. AI is really good at that already. You can make 2D sprites and just, you don't need an artist anymore. The whole art department is no longer required, for indie games or like single person games. Um, I don't know where AI is at making 3D models yet for 3D games, but if it's not doing that already, I'm sure it will eventually. So, yeah, it could replace those. Yeah, yeah, I guess I would be worried if I were an artist. Writing is interesting. A lot of people think AI writing is machine-like, but I mean, you can prompt it to write a bunch of different styles. It's probably pretty common. I mean, AI writes better than a lot of humans aren't very good at writing. A lot of people, even native English speakers, they don't know English grammar very well. So the AI is better than a lot of the population actually at writing. But the perception is kind of bad. Like, oh, an AI generated all this text. It's like people think badly of it, even if it can do a good job. But I think, especially in the future, it can do a pretty good job at writing, probably better than humans in a lot of ways. But yeah, you lose some of the art, like you lose the artistic vision of like someone crafting the story. Not that games have a lot of that. Games are notorious for having like bare bones, simple stories that aren't very artistic. So, um, yeah, maybe so AI would probably be used for writing in the future for games, I would say. Just because they already put so little emphasis on it most of the time. Mhm.
Anybody else?
I think AI might be good at production too, like prioritizing things and pushing the project along, but I don't think there's been any attempts to explore that yet. Not too many. I haven't heard about it anyway, but I think that's something it would be good at.
Well, you mean like the AI acting like a PM?
Yeah. Yeah. Or at least being used to help to drive the effort of the PM, what the PM is doing. Um, yeah, because it has you can put in all the information and knows like, oh, this kind of thing blocks this kind of person. It's very mathematical in a way to make something efficient. So anyway, that's just my random thought. I don't actually know for sure.
That's actually interesting because like in my place, like PM is probably like the most hated position.
Yeah, it'd be
And
better to hate the AI. Well, that was the same at Rockstar. That's why they fired all the producers.
I mean, it's just because like that's like like a paperwork kind of
Mhm.
job, right?
Yeah,
And it takes
sometimes,
a lot of time,
usually.
and it takes a lot of time. So
Hmm.
having AI to do that is gonna be very helpful.
Yeah,
Tedious
I
job.
think so. Yeah, I mean, a lot of producers are constantly giving game ideas too, and like doing more than just production work. Just, it's games are such a collaborative thing that everyone's usually giving ideas. So some producers do a lot more of one thing than another. Some don't do any paperwork. They just talk to people. So, mhm. Any more questions? I don't really have much in the slides. I
Any
mean,
more slides do we have?
I just had this, I think this is the last one. Um, Oh, I guess I can go. Okay, so this one is just like, oh, these are the different things involved in completing a game. I just filled in however many slots were there with random things that came to mind. But yeah, there's a lot involved. And a lot of these things have to interact with each other. So, um, you have to fix all the bugs. You have to have the story that you can play through all the way. It has to run properly. Fans get really upset if you drop a single frame, even though I personally can't even notice it, but it's like really bad press, like really bad reputation. People freak out, like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. It's dropping a frame. But I don't think it's that important, but it's actually prioritized in the industry a lot to make sure no frames are being dropped, just because it makes them look bad and people get upset about it. And I mean, a lot of people can notice. I personally don't notice when a game drops a frame. So, memory has to all fit on the console memory, everything that's active at one time in the world and doing things. You need to set up patches, potentially. You need a whole system to like fix bugs and add additional content for a lot of the games do and that sort of thing. Collision has to, all the things moving in the world have to interact with each other. All the gimmicks for puzzles have to be functioning. You need combat. You need the player have all these abilities that do different things when used on certain things in the world or certain enemies. You need cutscenes. You need everything, all the code to move stuff. The AI needs to, think and figure out what to do to make the game interesting. You have the non-playable characters giving story, dialogue, and you need systems for them to like speak to you. And you need like effects polish where it's like, oh, this effect could be slightly more sparkly. We spend a lot of time is spent on like every single effect in the game and like how it could look better and things like that. Terrain, like the ground you're walking on, and everything needs to be shaped, and so an artist needs to be involved in that. Physics needs to replicate like real world physics generally, projectiles moving through the air, melee attacks, health, menus, multiplayer, split screen, multiple players playing at once, characters moving around, the sky. Even a lot of time goes into just like making the sky look good and the technical stuff behind that and all the background and yeah, just random gameplay things, the area of effect attacks, damage being dealt and status effects. So yeah, that was just like kind of, here's all the stuff that's involved. And that's just, off the top of my head. So do more than that. Then the last slide was just what makes a good game? What components are important? Studios have a lot of different ideas about this and do things differently, and it's pretty subjective. And yeah, it's like there's a lot of different ways to make a game and to make it good. You can make it challenging. A lot of players like, oh, this is rewarding because it was a challenge and I overcame that challenge. Some people just care about the story where it's like, oh, if it's a good experience, like watching a movie, then that's a good game. So some people think, oh, if the graphics look the best, that's game of the year. A lot of people think like that, actually, surprisingly, even though it's I would say the lowest connection between the actual gameplay, the point of the game, the thing you're playing. But it adds a lot, right? It's like it looks cool. So some people just care about that. Gameplay, sometimes focus is like, let's actually make it fun. A lot of games focus on things being emergent, like combining different elements together on different items or different things in the world that's creates new behaviors that some of which don't necessarily weren't even planned for. Like again, Minecraft's a big example of that. Like there's just so many different mechanics and things that can interact that players made all kinds of stuff that wasn't even planned for. So a lot of games focus on emergent gameplay and trying to focus on that. So, you only have so much time when making a game, so you have to put in different amounts of effort onto whatever your studio is focusing on to improve that area. Yeah, and it's how it turns out is open to interpretation. Sometimes a studio focuses on one of these and not so much on the others, but people love it because that's the one thing that interested them. So, different people like different things, and there's so many people in the world that there's pretty much a user base you could get for games of a lot of different types, and you'll get a lot of fans as long as the PR is there so they know about it. So yeah, a lot of different areas you can focus on, but yeah, that was it. All the slides. So.
Thank you so much, Ryu.
Question, Rio. So when a game is successful, become a bestseller or something like that, you guys get bonuses for that, or
Usually depends on the studio, but yeah, most most studios will give you a pretty big bonus at the end of the year that the game released. It still doesn't put you at the same pay level as someone as like people working on websites or database engineers a lot of the time, but you know, it's nice. I guess like my salary is like 120 and the bonus is like 15. So yeah.
Is there an opening, Rio, for some of us?
No. Like I said, it's very hard industry to get into, very limited slots. So
Yeah, I was interested to become a game developer, but at that time my grade was C minus minus. So
mhm.
C minus.
That's
C++,
similar.
huh?
Not important. Yeah. That's close. You just need 2 lines and you turn it into C++ and you're good.
Language apa itu Mas? C minus minus?
And yeah, I mean, you really need to apply all over the country just because there's positions out there, but the window for each studio is pretty small. So it's like the chances of getting a job nearby that happens to be open, it's pretty hard. So yeah.
So
What
That's
about like
great.
career change? Like, let's say you are in the game industry for so many years,
Mhm.
and then you want to change career to another industry. Like,
Yeah.
is it something that is common?
I think that, yeah, that's pretty common. A lot of people I see leave the industry and go somewhere else when they get laid off, especially just because it's so hard to get another game job and they don't want to move. So they'll just find any tech job near them. And it's pretty easy because, again, making a game is so hard that you're pretty much qualified for any of the other jobs. I know a lot of companies want your experience in that specific thing, but for like a low level role, probably not so much. Transitioning from another industry to gaming is even harder, though, is really hard because game studios only care about games. They're like, how many games did you work on? How long did you work on games for? That's all they care about usually. It happens that like usually at the higher level or like a senior engineer or a lead engineer on, a tech company making applications could get a role in gaming, but it's not very common. So yeah, the game studios especially really like to see you worked in this industry specifically for a certain number of years. And they don't even care what you can do, like what your knowledge is. It's like for the positions, there's like how many years of experience you have. Okay, you're in this slot and we'll fill that position with someone with that level of experience. Because it's a rough estimation, right, of how good you are. The longer you work, the more you know. It's a bad estimation a lot of the time, but let's say you don't have a huge level of experience and they hire you for a senior position. Well, what if they maybe they're not very good at interviewing, they're not confident. Well, if they hire you and you don't know how to do the job, that's really bad. That makes them look really bad. So it's safer for them to say, "Oh, of course I hired this guy. He's already been doing this for 10 years. What anyone would hire this guy." So they have like the excuse. So it's kind of easier just to pick based on years experience. So that's tends to be what people do. Actually, for one job I applied to, I got every question right on their test and in their interview. Um, I even knew some stuff the interviewer didn't know, and like every question, 100% correct. And they called me back and they said, "Hey, you totally qualified for this position, for this lead position, but um, we don't think anyone's going to respect you as a lead just because you're too young. So we can't offer you this position."
I didn't know it happens in here, Rio. I
Yeah.
thought that's only in Indonesia.
Yeah, no. It doesn't happen in the UK, I hear, or maybe it does, but they don't tell you that's the reason because it's illegal in the UK. They're
Yeah.
like super strict about it. You cannot, it's like age discrimination. But here they just flat out, no, you're not old enough. We're not gonna hire you. Like,
Well, yeah, you can ask them like, okay, I will just go with the lower position, but keep my salary as the lead position.
well, they don't want to do that either because then they're paying you. Their goal is to save money, and they look good to their bosses if they save the most money. So And again, if they pay you more and then like, oh, you do a bad job, they're like, oh, well, that makes me look bad. I hired this guy who didn't even have experience and then he failed. And that's like they can be blamed for that. But yeah. If you have 20 years experience, you're like, who could have known this guy would do a bad job? He's worked 20 years. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, next we need to play game together at somebody's house who has kind of immersive or maybe group gaming together.
Yeah, and
Maybe play FIFA or
maybe not. I don't
even
have any
Mario
sports
Kart.
games really, but I have
That's
tennis.
true.
I have Mario Tennis,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, anyone can come over to play games. That's fine anytime.
There you go.
I have a lot of games to play.
We're
Um,
waiting for the invitation, Rio.
yeah,
Well,
maybe. Well, this is the invitation. You're all invited. Yeah, we can find a sports game. I don't have too many. I'm bad at sports
yeah.
games, so yeah, I would. Those are the only games I lose at.
Hey, so Rio, so question again. So like these big companies usually have uh like different offices around the world, right?
Yeah, like Rockstar had 7 studios, and they were all working on GTA 6 at the same time. So
Do they have like a specific discipline? Like for example, like I think like the Battlefield engine was developed in Sweden, right? I mean,
mhm.
or
Yeah.
originally from Sweden. So is it
Mhm.
like the talent pool or maybe the educations on those areas are more specific to graphics or engines, and then another
Yeah.
country is on arts? Is it?
Sometimes, especially like it happens. But yeah, that some studios are specialized, but they like to like mix things up a lot too because like, oh, if this studio is on the other side of the world and they're all sleeping, who's gonna help with this stuff? So they usually try and keep some staff from every department at every studio, but not always, but they try to. And then some studios are like super specialized where like they only do this one thing. Like I think Rockstar India, they worked on debug tracking software. Um, which for some reason Rockstar makes their own bug tracking software instead of using Jira because they're like, we're saving money, but they're wasting more money on engineering salaries to make the software, and it's terrible compared to Jira. So, um, yeah, that's not a good decision, but they think that it's business or business kind of and money kind of short-term money especially drives a lot of decisions for these companies. They're companies like any other. I mean, the only difference is you can wear a t-shirt because they're not very professional. They let you they're very casual. Um, and the management is very casual, but at the top, it's like, it's a CEO, it's someone who's into business and trying to make money. So
Would that be a concern for a lot of you guys? Well, maybe in the gaming industry, knowing that we are trying to obviously save money, G&A, and all that kind of stuff. Knowing that we have this kind of job can be easily offshore or outsourced, let's say to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. How how does
mm.
that how does
Well,
that make you feel about
a lot of
this?
companies try even,
Uh,
but it doesn't always go well because, you need a team who knows your game systems and how your engineering stuff works. And a lot of times they try and offload it to somewhere else and there's just not good communication because they're on this side of the world. There's the cultural barrier and they don't do a good job all the time. So, that's happening less, I think, these days, but it still happens sometimes, but
yeah, at least for oil and gas, some big companies or multinational companies are trying to do that, but they are missing the tacit knowledge that we have in here
yeah.
regarding the oil and gas itself. They can do a lot of good work, but
Mm.
it's not necessarily applicable to what we know. For example, we have some IT projects, we give it to them, yeah, they can do it, but they don't know the essence of it. They don't know why we are doing that
Yeah,
project.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
they can do it from
Mhm.
programming perspective. They can do it from ML perspective. So yeah, that's kind
Yeah.
of similar issue what we are facing in oil and
Mhm.
gas now.
Yeah. For example, oh, never mind. I can't talk about
Yeah.
it. Um, But some studios will outsource a lot of work, and then it's very often comes back not high quality, and a lot of it has to be redone, and sometimes it takes even longer than doing it from scratch. It's a similar thing with having the AI do it, honestly. A lot of the times, it's like if it's not in-house, they're not communicating, they're not familiar with everything. It's just not going to be high quality a lot of the time. So.
So in terms
Well,
of education, like the universities in US, like I mean, do we have like a good place? I mean, in terms of video games developments, or there's I don't know if there's any other country that probably better than in the US. Do you know?
Um, so actual game development majors are pretty rare. Um, and even if they do have them, they don't really teach you how to make a game. So the game industry isn't really concerned about game development specific majors. They're just like looking for engineers. So in that regard, you can come from any country. In fact, a lot of the engineers in-house at all the US studios, a lot of them are from other countries, often, um, large parts of the team. So yeah, very common. Especially like Indian engineers are super common. They don't have the problem of like not understanding because they're in-house, they're in the studio, yeah. So yeah, the problem is less what country someone's coming from. It's more like everyone's together in the same spot. Um, but yeah, people get hired from all countries. The only concern there really is the companies don't want to have to sponsor a visa if they don't have to. So it's like they just prefer citizens generally. It's because it's easier than having to manage all that stuff. Mhm.
it's almost 10 o'clock. Just a time check for everybody. I think we've just heard a really useful and informative topic about creating a game and all aspect in making a game. So I would like to thank our speaker and volunteer today, Rio. We really learned a lot about today, and we really appreciate some of the slides and insights that you had shared with us. Yeah, like I said, the next thing would be get together. We can potentially play a game and enjoy an afternoon or evening together for that purpose.
Yeah.
I know everybody, you will still have a chance to ask Rio at later stage. You can reach out to him directly if
Oh yeah.
Rio, you're
And
open to that, or
yeah, anyone
feel
can
free
message
to.
me on WhatsApp from the
Mhm.
group. Yeah.
If there's any specific interest, sending your kids to game school, or maybe you're interested in
Mhm.
becoming a programmer, I mean, he
Yeah.
is a great resources in our community here. So again, we really appreciate your
Mhm.
willingness and availability to have this special topic shared for this evening.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
actually a professor part-time sometimes, so I've taught like graduate courses on making games and stuff. So I like teaching. So yeah.
that's awesome. No, I'm glad that it comes from our community, somebody who is willing to share his knowledge and experience to the rest of the uh, people here.
Mhm.
With that, let's make a dua, a prayer. We ask for repentance and supplication to Allah because potentially